For 3 years, I've been forgotten in a rusty trailer where the wind whispers through cracks and my son's promises faded like old photographs. Old people bring bad luck, my daughter-in-law Tiffany told him on our last phone call. But what she never knew was that my neighbor Myrtle, a simple woman in worn slippers who talked to flowers, was hiding secrets bigger than the world itself. When Myrtle died, she left me a mysterious blue box containing a key to a luxury penthouse, a photograph of 2 young women that changed everything I thought I knew, and a web of dark family secrets. Now, after years of silence, my son and his wife suddenly want to make peace and move in with me. But they have no idea what's waiting for them when those elevator doors open, or that some truths, once revealed, can never be buried again. Follow my channel for more heart-wrenching true stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family. Like and comment with where you're watching from. And let me know if you've ever discovered that someone close to you wasn't who they claimed to be. My name is Loretta. I'm 71 years old. And for 3 long winters, I've heard my name being forgotten. It was as if I had died, even though I was still breathing. The day my son Marcus and his wife Tiffany dropped me off at that rusty trailer in Mobile, Alabama, I remember watching their car disappear down the dirt road, leaving nothing but a cloud of dust that settled on my tears. "We'll call you tomorrow, Mom," Marcus had said, not quite meeting my eyes. That was 1,095 days ago. I counted each one. The trailer they left me in creaked with every gust of wind, like it was sighing alongside me. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and I'd place buckets around like I was arranging flowers at church. The wallpaper was peeling away, revealing secrets the walls had kept for decades. I had a torn blanket, a hot plate that worked when it wanted to, and a phone that rarely rang. When it did ring, my heart would leap into my throat thinking, finally it's Marcus. But it never was. The last time he called, 3 months after dropping me here, his voice was cold, distant. "Mom, Tiffany doesn't want you calling anymore. She says old people bring bad luck." I gasped, feeling like I'd been slapped. "But I'm your mother," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Look, we're trying to have a baby. She's superstitious. I'll call you when things settle down." Then silence. The dial tone became my only companion. That night I cried until my pillowcase was soaked through. I thought about the home I'd lost when Marcus sold it after my husband died. The garden I'd tended for 30 years. The neighbors who knew my name. All gone, replaced by this metal box that trembled with both the wind and the silence. But I wasn't the only living soul there. There was Myrtle, my neighbor in the trailer next door. She was a simple woman, always shuffling around in her worn-out slippers, carrying an old radio that played the same Billie Holiday record over and over. Her face was a map of wrinkles, each one telling a story of hardship, but her eyes sparkled with something I couldn't quite name. Knowledge? Secrets? Peace? Every evening, she'd knock on my door with a chipped teapot and 2 mismatched cups. "Tea time, honey," she'd announce, as if we were ladies at the Ritz. Her hands were gnarled like ancient tree roots, but they poured the tea with the grace of a queen. Myrtle talked about flowers as if they were people. "The marigolds are feeling mighty proud today," or "Those petunias are gossiping again." I thought it was just the charming eccentricity of an old woman. I had no idea that this simple woman, who shared her tea and spoke to flowers, held a secret bigger than the world itself. The first time I saw her cough up blood was on a Tuesday. We were sitting on her rickety porch steps, watching the sunset paint the trailer park in colors too beautiful for such a forgotten place. "Pretty, ain't it?" she said, right before her body convulsed with a cough that sprayed crimson droplets onto her faded house dress. She wiped her mouth with a handkerchief, as if nothing unusual had happened. "Myrtle, we need to get you to a doctor," I cried, gripping her bony shoulder. She just shook her head and patted my hand. "No doctors, Loretta. My time's coming, and that's just fine." Then she looked at me with those knowing eyes and said something that would change everything. "If I go before you, look in the blue box." That night, lying on my lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling where water stains formed shapes like strange continents, I replayed Marcus's words in my mind. Old people bring bad luck. After everything I'd sacrificed for him. After the nights I'd walked him with colic. The school lunches I'd packed with little notes inside. The extra jobs I'd taken to put him through college. Now I was just bad luck. I felt something harden inside me then. Not hate, exactly, but a seed of something that would grow into strength. I didn't know it yet, but in that suffocating silence of the trailer, my true story was just beginning. And that blue box Myrtle mentioned? It would be the key that unlocked a door I never knew existed. The next morning I watched Myrtle through my window. She was talking to her daffodils, her lips moving in what looked like a goodbye. I wondered what secrets she was telling them, and what secrets were waiting for me in that blue box. The trailer creaked around me, trembling with unspoken truths, and I waited, not knowing that everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. Myrtle passed away on a cold November morning, while I was making coffee with bottled water because the tap in my trailer ran rusty. The world outside was painted in shades of gray, and a thin layer of frost covered the brittle grass between our trailers. I remember every detail of that moment, the way the spoon clinked against the chipped mug, how the heater sputtered and wheezed like an old man trying to catch his breath, and the sudden hollow feeling that washed over me. I knew something was wrong before anyone told me. There was no ambulance, no commotion. In a place like ours, death comes quietly, slipping in through the cracks like the cold draft that tormented us all winter. It was Tommy, the landlord's son, who knocked on my door an hour later. He stood there in his faded work jacket, twisting his baseball cap in his hands. "Miss Loretta," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Myrtle's gone. Found her this morning when I went to fix her steps." He shuffled his feet on my doormat. "You were her only friend, far as I know. Thought you should hear it from a person, not the cops." I thanked him, closed the door, and then slid down against it until I was sitting on the floor, my knees pulled up to my chest like a child. I cried for Myrtle, for the gentle soul who spoke to flowers and shared her tea. But I also trembled with a different kind of emotion, anticipation mixed with dread. The blue box was waiting. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to enter Myrtle's trailer. Everything was just as she'd left it, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the table, a cardigan draped over her rocking chair, and her slippers placed neatly by the bed, as if waiting for feet that would never fill them again. The air was thick with absence. I found the blue box under her bed, right where I somehow knew it would be. It wasn't fancy, just an old shoebox painted a faded cerulean blue, with my name written across the top in black marker. The sight of my name in her shaky handwriting made my throat tighten. Inside the box were 3 things: a key with a tag that read Atlanta, a formally typed document sealed with a notary stamp, and a photograph. My hands trembled as I picked up the photo, yellowed with age. It showed 2 young women, arms linked, laughing in front of a grand mansion with marble columns. One was unmistakably a younger Myrtle, her face smooth and vibrant, her eyes holding the same sparkle I'd come to know. But it was the other woman who made my blood run cold. It was Tiffany, my daughter-in-law Tiffany. Younger, perhaps in her late teens, but undeniably her. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "It can't be." But it was. The same sharp chin, the same calculating eyes, the same perfect smile that never quite reached those eyes. Tiffany, who had called me a burden. Tiffany, who said old people brought bad luck. Tiffany, who had convinced my son to leave me in this rusty trailer to rot. With shaking fingers, I unfolded the document. It was a will, officially notarized and dated just 3 months ago. In precise legal language, it stated that I, Loretta Mae Jenkins, was the sole heir to a property owned by Myrtle Elizabeth Hargrove, a penthouse in the Buckhead district of Atlanta, Georgia. I laughed then, a hollow sound that bounced off the trailer walls. It had to be some kind of joke. Myrtle, who wore the same threadbare dress for a week straight. Myrtle, who collected aluminum cans for spare change. Myrtle, who lived in a trailer that made mine look luxurious. But the phone call came 2 days later as I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the photograph. A stern-voiced attorney introduced himself as Mr. Winters, executor of Myrtle Hargrove's estate. Mrs. Jenkins, he said, I'm calling to discuss your inheritance and arrange for you to take possession of the property. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice small. Myrtle was just my neighbor. She didn't have anything. There was a pause on the line. Mrs. Jenkins, did Miss Hargrove not explain her situation to you? No, I replied, still staring at the photograph, at Tiffany's face. She didn't explain anything. Mr. Winters cleared his throat. Miss Hargrove was the sister of Richard Hargrove, founder of Hargrove Real Estate Development. She chose to remove herself from public life 41 years ago, following a family dispute, but she maintained ownership of several properties, including the Peachtree Penthouse, which she has left to you. My mind was swimming. A family dispute? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, Mrs. Jenkins, but the penthouse is yours now, along with a trust fund to maintain it. There's a car service arranged to bring you to Atlanta whenever you're ready. After hanging up, I sat in silence, piecing together a puzzle with too many missing parts. Myrtle had been hiding, but from what? And how did Tiffany fit into this picture? Had my own daughter-in-law known who my neighbor was all along? The photograph seemed to pulse in my hand, the two smiling faces now sinister in their secrecy. What Myrtle had never told me was that she was the sister of a real estate mogul, and that she had vanished from the map to escape a family war that began with a betrayal that somehow involved the woman who had taken my son from me. As night fell and the trailer creaked around me, I made a decision. I would go to Atlanta, I would claim this penthouse, and I would discover what connected the simple woman who talked to flowers with the woman who had ruined my life. The key felt heavy in my pocket, heavy with possibility, heavy with truth. The car that came for me was black and sleek, with tinted windows that reflected the dilapidated trailers like a funhouse mirror. I stood at the door of my home for the past 3 years, a single suitcase by my side, containing everything I owned in the world. Mrs. Wallace from 3 trailers down watched me with undisguised curiosity, her cigarette dangling from her lips. "Moving on up, Loretta," she called, her voice raspy from decades of smoking. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. How could I explain that my dead neighbor had left me a penthouse, that the woman in threadbare dresses and worn slippers had been hiding a fortune, that somehow my daughter-in-law was tangled up in this web of secrets? The driver, a young man with a crisp uniform and kind eyes, took my battered suitcase as if it contained precious jewels. "Mrs. Jenkins? I'm Derek. I'll be taking you to Atlanta today." The drive took almost 7 hours, but it felt like crossing into another dimension. I watched the landscape change through the window, the rural poverty of southern Alabama giving way to the lush greenery of Georgia, and finally, the glittering skyline of Atlanta. My heart pounded harder with each mile marker we passed. "We're approaching Buckhead now, ma'am," Derek said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "One of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Atlanta." I nodded, clutching my purse where I'd tucked Myrtle's photograph. The closer we got to the city, the more unreal everything felt. This wasn't my world. I was Loretta Jenkins, the woman abandoned in a trailer park, the forgotten mother, the discarded grandmother who never was. The car pulled up to a towering glass building that seemed to touch the clouds. A uniformed doorman rushed forward to open my door, smiling as if I belonged there. "Welcome to the Sovereign, ma'am. We've been expecting you." My legs trembled as I followed him through a marble lobby with ceilings so high they made me dizzy. Potted palms reached toward crystal chandeliers, and the floor gleamed like a mirror. The elevator was lined with mirrors and mahogany, making me painfully aware of my discount store clothes and scuffed shoes. "Penthouse A," the doorman announced proudly, using a special key to access the top floor. "The crown jewel of the Sovereign." When the elevator doors opened, I stepped into a small private foyer with a single door. My hand shook as I inserted Myrtle's key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting for me. The door swung open to reveal a world of light and space and silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Atlanta skyline like a living painting. Gleaming hardwood floors stretched beneath modern furniture in creams and blues. A crystal vase of fresh flowers sat on a glass dining table that could seat 12. But what struck me most was the silence. A thick, cushioned silence that felt nothing like the hollow quiet of my trailer. This silence was expensive, insulated, safe, and yet I felt afraid. This penthouse, this palace in the sky, belonged to me now, but it felt stolen, as if I'd slipped through a crack in the universe into someone else's life. I moved from room to room like a ghost, afraid to touch anything, to disturb the perfection. The kitchen was bigger than my entire trailer, with appliances I didn't know how to use. The master bathroom had a tub you could swim in, and the closets, empty waiting, were larger than the bedroom I'd left behind. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the polished floors, a terrible question formed in my mind. Should I tell Tiffany what I'd found? Should I call Marcus and reveal my sudden change in fortune? The thought made my stomach clench. 3 years without a visit. 3 years of, "Sorry, Mom, we're busy this weekend." 3 years of being told that old people bring bad luck. And now, here I was, in a penthouse that somehow connected to Tiffany's past. I sat on a white leather sofa that probably cost more than a year's worth of my Social Security checks, and tried to think. The photograph seemed to burn in my pocket. 2 young women laughing in front of a mansion. Myrtle and Tiffany. But how? When? Tiffany was in her early 30s now. In the photo, she couldn't have been more than 18. And then there was the other nagging question. If Myrtle had all this wealth, why had she chosen to live in a trailer park in Mobile, Alabama? What was she hiding from? Or who? As if the penthouse itself held answers, I began to explore more carefully. In the second bedroom, set up as a guest room, I found a small desk in the corner. The drawer stuck slightly when I pulled it, revealing a leather-bound book inside. My heart raced as I recognized Myrtle's handwriting on the first page. It was her diary. I shouldn't read it. It felt invasive, disrespectful. But my fingers were already turning the pages, my eyes scanning entries dated years back, filled with names I didn't recognize and events I couldn't contextualize. Until I found an entry from just last year. Tiffany knows where she is, but she pretends she doesn't know, and it's killing her. She. Who was she? The question echoed in my mind as darkness fell over Atlanta, the city lights creating constellations below me. I closed the diary, feeling like an intruder, and walked to the windows. From this height, people looked like ants, cars like toys, everything small and manageable. But the truth, whatever it was, loomed large and frightening. Myrtle had left me more than a penthouse. She'd left me a mystery, and somehow I knew that unraveling it would either save me or destroy me completely. As I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching a world I didn't belong to glitter beneath me, I made a decision. I would stay. I would learn the truth. I would find out what connected Myrtle, the woman who spoke to flowers, with Tiffany, the woman who stole my son, and perhaps in doing so, I would finally find myself again. I spent my first week in the penthouse feeling like an imposter. I'd wake up disoriented, reaching for the familiar leak in my trailer ceiling, only to find my hand lost in the plush down of an expensive duvet. The shower had so many jets and settings that the first time I used it, I ended up drenched on the bathroom floor, laughing and crying at the same time. I'd never known luxury could be so complicated. At night, I'd stand by those floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Atlanta pulse below me. From 32 stories up, the city looked like a circuit board of lights and movement, so different from the still darkness of the trailer park, where the only lights at night were the occasional passing car or the blue flicker of a TV through thin curtains. I spent my days exploring the penthouse, discovering new details with each passing hour. A hidden wine cellar behind what I thought was a pantry door, a small balcony garden accessible through the master bedroom, where herbs and flowers grew in terracotta pots. Someone had been caring for them in Myrtle's absence. The management company, perhaps? Or had Myrtle visited this place, this other life, without my knowing? But mostly, I read her diary, page after page of a life I never knew she had. Charity galas, business meetings, family disputes. Names I didn't recognize appeared throughout. Richard, her brother, I assumed. Caroline, Edward, and over, T, never written in full, just the initial. Was T for Tiffany? And if so, what was she to Myrtle? As the days passed, I became bolder. I began to use the kitchen with its commercial-grade appliances. I ran my fingers over the silk curtains without fear of soiling them. I even ventured into the building's amenities, a gym I had no intention of using, a residence lounge where I was too intimidated to sit, and a rooftop garden where I finally found peace, reminding me of how Myrtle used to talk to her flowers. But I avoided making a decision about contacting Marcus and Tiffany. What would I even say? "Hello, son, guess what? I'm rich now. Do you love me again?" The thought made me physically ill. It was on my 9th night in the penthouse when everything changed. I'd fallen asleep on the sofa while reading Myrtle's diary, lulled by the distant sound of traffic far below. The sharp, insistent buzz of the intercom jolted me awake. I blinked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who could be calling at this hour? I didn't know a soul in Atlanta. For a moment I considered not answering. But something, perhaps Myrtle's spirit, pushed me toward the intercom panel by the door. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin and afraid. "Penthouse A?" The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker. "There's a young woman here insisting she knows you. She seems..." He paused, lowering his voice. "Distressed. Should I send her away?" I hesitated. "What's her name?" "She won't give it. Says you'll know her when you see her." A chill ran down my spine. This felt like a scene from one of those thriller movies Marcus used to watch, where nothing good ever came from midnight visitors. But again, that strange compulsion moved me. "Send her up," I said before I could change my mind. Those minutes waiting for the elevator to deliver my mysterious visitor were the longest of my life. I stood frozen by the door, 1,000 possibilities racing through my mind. Was it Tiffany, somehow having discovered my inheritance? A relative of Myrtle's, coming to contest the will? Or something more sinister? The soft ping of the private elevator made me jump. I peered through the peephole and saw a young woman standing in the foyer, her back to my door. Her hair was a tangled mass of dark blonde, unwashed and unkempt. Her clothes, jeans, and an oversized sweater hung loosely on her thin frame. She swayed slightly, as if standing still required great effort. With a deep breath, I opened the door. The woman turned slowly, and I found myself looking into a face that was both unfamiliar and hauntingly recognizable. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under bloodshot eyes, but with a bone structure that triggered some distant recognition in my mind. She didn't speak. Her eyes, wide and fearful, darted past me to scan the apartment. Her hands trembled violently, and that's when I noticed she was clutching something. A silver charm bracelet, its links tangled around her fingers like a rosary. "Can I help you?" I asked softly, afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter her like glass. She looked at me then, really looked, with eyes the color of stormy seas. And still, she said nothing. Instead, she extended her trembling hand, uncurling her fingers to reveal the charm bracelet more clearly. A single word was engraved on a flat silver tag among the charms. Lindsay. Lindsay. The name meant nothing to me. But as I looked from the bracelet to her face, searching for clues, a flash of recognition hit me. Those eyes, that chin, the slight asymmetry of her features. She looked like Tiffany. Not identical, but similar enough to be. "Are you related to Tiffany Hargrove?" I whispered, the pieces suddenly falling into place. At the name, the young woman flinched as if I'd struck her. Her eyes filled with tears, and she began to shake more violently. I instinctively reached out to steady her, guiding her inside before she collapsed. As she stumbled past me into the penthouse, her gaze landed on a framed photograph I'd placed on the entryway table. Myrtle's photograph, the one I'd found in the blue box, the one with her and young Tiffany. The reaction was immediate and visceral, The young woman, Lindsay, dropped to her knees, a keening sound escaping her throat as tears spilled down her cheeks. It wasn't the noise of ordinary crying. It was the sound of a wounded animal, primal and raw. I knelt beside her, awkwardly placing my arm around her shoulders. "You knew Myrtle?" I asked gently. Between sobs, she managed to nod, and then, in a voice rough from disuse, she whispered 5 words that turned my world upside down. She saved me from my sister, Tiffany. This broken young woman was Tiffany's sister, Lindsay, the name on the bracelet. As I helped her to the sofa, my mind raced to place her. Hadn't there been something in the news years ago? A wealthy family's daughter who had vanished after some kind of breakdown. The details were hazy, but I suddenly remembered Marcus mentioning once that Tiffany's sister had problems, and they didn't talk about her. According to the newspapers, Lindsay had been missing for 7 years after a psychological collapse, but she didn't seem lost. She seemed hidden. As I wrapped a blanket around her shivering form and went to make tea, I realized that the mystery of Myrtle's penthouse had just grown deeper, and somehow I was now responsible for the broken sister of the woman who had taken everything from me. Lindsay slept for 14 hours straight that first night, curled in a fetal position on the guest bed, still clutching that silver bracelet. I checked on her every hour like she was a sick child, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest, studying the face that was so similar yet so different from Tiffany's. Where Tiffany's features were sharp and calculated, Lindsay's were softer, vulnerable. Even in sleep, she looked haunted. The morning after her arrival, I made scrambled eggs and toast, the scent drawing her from the bedroom like a timid animal. She ate ravenously, then retreated into silence again. For 3 days, this was our pattern. Small offerings of food and comfort, brief moments of connection, and long stretches of silence. She barely spoke, but when she did, her words were precise and carefully chosen, as if each one cost her something. "Myrtle knew you would come," she said on the 3rd evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint Atlanta's skyline in shades of amber and rose. "She said you were kind, that you would understand." "Understand what, Lindsay?" I asked, my heart racing. "What happened to you?" She twisted the bracelet around her wrist, around and around. They said I was crazy, that I imagined things, that I needed to be fixed. Her eyes, when they met mine, held oceans of pain. But I wasn't crazy. I just saw the truth. Before I could ask what truth she meant, my phone rang. The sudden noise made Lindsay jump like a startled deer. I glanced at the screen and felt the blood drain from my face. Marcus's name flashed like an accusation. With trembling hands, I answered. "Hello? Mom." My son's voice, so familiar yet so distant, sent a jolt through my chest. 3 years since I'd heard it directly addressed to me rather than through voicemail. "How are you?" The casual question, as if we'd spoken just yesterday, as if he hadn't abandoned me to a leaking trailer, made my throat tighten. "I'm fine, Marcus." "Why are you calling?" There was a pause, then a throat clearing. "Well, we heard something interesting." Another pause. "Is it true you bought a penthouse in Atlanta?" The question hit me like a slap. Not "I miss you," not "I'm sorry," but "Is it true you have money now?" I glanced at Lindsay, who had gone rigid in her chair, eyes wide with fear. "Who told you that?" I asked carefully. "It doesn't matter." His voice took on the impatient tone I'd grown to dread. "Is it true, Mom? Because if it is, that's great news. We've been worried about you, living in that trailer." Worried. 3 years without a visit, and he'd been worried. "Yes," I said simply. "I have a new place in Atlanta." What followed was a rush of enthusiasm so false, it made my skin crawl. Marcus was so happy for me. He and Tiffany had been meaning to reach out. They wanted to reconnect and put the past behind us. And then came the words that made Lindsay's face drain of all color. "Tiffany and I would love to come visit, to make peace. Maybe this weekend." I watched Lindsay shake her head frantically, panic etching itself across her features. But something else stirred in me, a curiosity, a need to see this through. That would be nice, I heard myself say, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. I'll text you the address. After hanging up, Lindsay exploded from her chair. You can't let them come here. You don't understand what she's capable of. I think I do, I said quietly. She took my son from me, made him believe I was worthless. It's worse than that, Lindsay whispered, hugging herself tightly. So much worse. That evening, as Lindsay anxiously paced the living room, I discovered a cardboard box tucked in the back of Myrtle's closet. Inside were dozens of VHS tapes, meticulously labeled with dates stretching back 7 years. With shaking hands, I connected an old VCR I found alongside the tapes to the sleek modern television that dominated one wall of the living room. The first tape showed Myrtle, looking much as I'd known her, sitting in what appeared to be a small apartment, not the penthouse, somewhere more modest. Across from her sat Lindsay, younger but already showing signs of the trauma that now defined her. They were talking, Myrtle's voice gentle but probing. Tell me again what happened that night, dear, Myrtle said on the tape. Lindsay's recorded voice was stronger than her present one, though still fragile. I saw the papers on Dad's desk, the real company numbers, not the ones Tiffany showed the investors. She was stealing millions, laundering it through shell companies. My breath caught. Embezzlement? And when you confronted her? Myrtle prompted gently. The Lindsay on the tape began to shake. She said no one would believe me, that she'd make sure of it. That night I found pills in my food. I started feeling strange, confused. The next day, I was in a psychiatric hospital, with Tiffany telling everyone I'd tried to kill myself, that I was delusional. As tape after tape played, a horrifying picture emerged. Tiffany manipulating their family fortune, gaslighting her sister, eventually having her committed to various institutions when Lindsay threatened to expose her. Myrtle, their father's sister, long estranged from the family, had somehow helped Lindsay escape and had kept her hidden for years, moving her from place to place, documenting everything. In the last tape, dated just 2 months ago, Myrtle looked directly into the camera. Loretta, if you're watching this, it's because I trusted you. Show the truth, make justice happen, and take care of her. Is no one took care of you. 2 days later, Marcus and Tiffany arrived. I'd prepared carefully, setting the dining table for 3 with Myrtle's fine china. But it wasn't for a meal. It was for a revelation. Lindsay, terrified but resolute, agreed to my plan. She sat in the living room wearing a simple blue blouse that had belonged to Myrtle, the VHS tape cradled in her hands like a weapon. The doorbell rang at precisely 6 p.m. I smoothed my dress, the nicest I owned, though still woefully inadequate for this palace in the sky, and opened the door. Marcus looked older, his once dark hair now streaked with premature gray. He held flowers, grocery store carnations that seemed pathetic against the backdrop of the penthouse's elegance. But it was Tiffany who captured my attention, perfectly coiffed, wearing clothes that probably cost more than a year's worth of my Social Security. Her smile as practiced as a pageant queen's. "Mom?" Marcus said awkwardly, leaning in for an equally awkward hug. "This place is amazing." "Loretta!" Tiffany's voice was honey over ice. "What a lovely surprise after all this time. We've missed you." They stepped into the entryway, both of them taking in the opulence around them with poorly disguised calculation. I could almost see them tallying the value, wondering what else I might have, what they might claim. And then they saw Lindsay. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. Tiffany's perfect mask shattered, her face contorting with shock and then fury. Marcus went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "What is she doing here?" Tiffany hissed, all pretense of warmth evaporating. Lindsay rose from the sofa, still clutching the tape, her eyes locked with her sister's. The air between them crackled with a history I was only beginning to understand. "Hello, Tiffany," Lindsay said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it yet. "It's been a while." The dinner I'd prepared remained in the kitchen, untouched. The plates sat empty on the table. This meal would be different. A feast of truths too long hidden and too bitter to swallow. The silence that followed Lindsay's greeting was like the moment before a storm breaks, heavy, electric, and filled with foreboding. I stood between them watching Tiffany's perfect face transform. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the rage that flooded her cheeks with color, or the fear that made her eyes dart frantically around the room as if searching for escape routes. "You're supposed to be at Lakewood," she finally said, her voice a harsh whisper. "How did you get out? Who helped you?" Marcus looked between his wife and Lindsay, confusion etched across his features. "Tiffany, what's going on? You said your sister was traveling abroad. You said she was studying in Europe." Tiffany's laugh was brittle, like glass about to shatter. "She's sick, Marcus. Delusional. She's been in psychiatric facilities for years, not traveling, not studying, locked up, where she belongs." Lindsay flinched but held her ground, her knuckles white around the VHS tape in her hands. "Is that what you told everyone? That I was in Europe while you had me drugged and committed? You tried to kill yourself," Tiffany snapped. "You were hallucinating, making up stories." The doctors all agreed. "The doctors you paid," Lindsay interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "The doctors who never ran a single toxicology test to see what you were putting in my food." Marcus moved toward the sofa, his legs seemingly unsteady beneath him. "What is she talking about, Tiffany?" Tiffany's composed facade was crumbling by the second. "She's lying. She's always been jealous of me, of what I built. She couldn't handle that Dad trusted me with the company instead of her." "I found the real books," Lindsay said, each word deliberate and clear. "I saw what you were doing with the company funds, the shell corporations, the fake investment reports." "Shut up!" Tiffany's scream echoed off the penthouse's high ceilings. She lunged forward, but I stepped between them, surprising myself with my own courage. "That's enough," I said firmly. "Sit down, Tiffany. There's something you both need to see." For a moment I thought she might strike me. Her hand twitched at her side, and her eyes burned with a hatred that made my blood run cold. But something, perhaps the realization that she was outnumbered, or the fear of what we might know, made her sink slowly onto the edge of a chair, her spine rigid with tension. Marcus looked lost, his gaze bouncing between his wife and her sister. "Mom, what's going on? How do you know Lindsay? Why are you involved in this?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I took the tape from Lindsay's trembling hands and inserted it into the VCR I'd set up earlier. The television screen flickered to life, showing Myrtle's face, serious, determined, decades of wisdom etched into the lines around her eyes. "That's Aunt Myrtle," Tiffany gasped. "But she's been gone for years. She abandoned the family." "No," I said quietly. "She was watching, waiting, documenting." The Myrtle on the screen began to speak, addressing me directly across time. "Loretta, if you're seeing this, then I'm gone, and you found Lindsay. You're probably wondering why I chose you, a stranger, to inherit my home and to continue my work. The truth is, you weren't a stranger to me. I've watched you for years, ever since Tiffany married your son. I saw how she isolated you, just like she did to Lindsay. Different methods, same result." Tiffany lunged for the remote, but Lindsay intercepted her, wrestling it away. "You need to watch this," Lindsay said, tears streaming down her face. "All of it." The tape continued, showing a series of interviews between Myrtle and Lindsay, documenting the systematic gaslighting and abuse. There were medical records Myrtle had somehow obtained, showing suspicious patterns of medication changes whenever Lindsay became more lucid. There were financial documents revealing the depth of Tiffany's embezzlement from the family company. But most damning were the recorded phone conversations between Tiffany and various doctors, clinic administrators, and even orderlies. Evidence of bribes, of instructions to keep Lindsay heavily medicated, of threats if anyone asked too many questions. With each new revelation, Marcus seemed to physically shrink, his shoulders hunching as if under an unbearable weight. Tiffany's denials grew more frantic, then tapered off into a seething silence as the evidence mounted. "You're making a mistake," she finally said, her voice deadly calm. "All of you. Lindsay has always been unstable. She's manipulating you. Am I manipulating this too? I asked, inserting another tape. This one showed Tiffany in Myrtle's trailer, my neighbor's trailer, 3 years ago. She was searching through drawers, upending furniture, clearly looking for something. Where did you get that? Tiffany's voice had risen an octave. That's not me. That's fabricated. It's you, I said softly. The day before you convinced Marcus to leave me there. You knew Myrtle lived next door. You were looking for something. Maybe the evidence she'd collected? But you didn't find it, did you? Because it was here, in this penthouse, all along. Marcus stood suddenly, his face ashen. You told me that trailer park was safe, that it was a nice community for seniors. You said it was all we could afford while we saved for the baby we were trying to have. It was a lie, I said, the words tasting like poison. All of it. There was never a baby on the way. She knew exactly what she was doing. Tiffany's composure finally shattered completely. She flew at me, nails extended like claws, a scream tearing from her throat that seemed barely human. Lindsay moved faster than I would have thought possible, placing herself between us. Marcus grabbed his wife from behind, restraining her flailing arms. You stupid old woman! Tiffany spat, struggling against Marcus's grip. You have no idea what you've done. When I'm finished with all of you. But her threat was cut short by a sharp knock at the door. 3 police officers stood in the hallway, accompanied by a stern-looking woman in a pantsuit, who introduced herself as Detective Rivera. We received a call from the building security, she said, her eyes taking in the scene. Tiffany still restrained by Marcus, Lindsay trembling but upright, me standing by the television where Myrtle's face was frozen in a moment of testimony. Something about a disturbance. Is everything all right here? No, Lindsay said clearly. Everything is not all right, but it's about to be. She turned to the detective, shoulders squared despite her obvious fear. I'd like to report a crime. Several crimes, actually. And we have evidence. As the police took our statements and began the process of cataloging Myrtle's meticulous documentation, I watched Tiffany's perfect world crumble around her. The mask had not just slipped, it had shattered, revealing the monster beneath. In the kitchen, the dinner I'd prepared grew cold on the counter. The table, set for a meal that would never be served, stood as a silent witness to the unraveling of years of deception. Myrtle's final tape, the one I hadn't yet played, sat waiting on the coffee table. On its label, written in her shaky hand, was a simple message. For Loretta, the beginning. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions and statements. Detective Rivera set up a makeshift command post at my dining table, her officers cataloging each tape, each document that Myrtle had meticulously preserved. Tiffany sat stone-faced on the sofa, refusing to speak without her attorney present. The fury that had erupted from her earlier had calcified into an icy composure that was somehow more frightening than her rage. Marcus hovered awkwardly between worlds, not sitting with his wife, but not quite standing with Lindsay and me either. He looked hollowed out, as if someone had scooped away his insides and left only a shell behind. Every few minutes, his gaze would drift to Tiffany, a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror crossing his features. I don't understand, he said to no one in particular, his voice barely audible. All these years, was any of it real? No one answered him. The officers continued their work, the soft hum of their voices and the mechanical click of the VCR as they reviewed tape after tape, creating a bizarre soundtrack to the unraveling of lives. Around midnight, Detective Rivera approached me, her dark eyes tired but alert. Mrs. Jenkins, we have enough here to take Mrs. Hargrove in for questioning. The financial evidence alone warrants a formal investigation, and the medical fraud allegations are substantial. I nodded, feeling strangely empty. This wasn't triumph. It was just sad. A family destroyed by greed, lives derailed by cruelty. I glanced at Lindsay, who sat curled in an armchair, watching as an officer carefully packed the tapes into evidence bags. What about her? I asked quietly. Lindsay needs protection and care. The detective's expression softened slightly. We'll take her statement separately, make sure she has proper medical attention, but she'll need a place to stay. Someone to look after her while this proceeds. She stays with me, I said without hesitation. The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise Detective Rivera, but I knew they were right the moment they left my lips. As they prepared to take Tiffany to the station, she finally broke her silence. Rising from the sofa with a dignity that seemed obscene given the circumstances, she looked directly at me. "You have no idea what you've done," she said, her voice soft but edged with steel. "My father built an empire. I protected it. Everything I did was for the family." "You are not the family," Lindsay replied, her voice stronger than I'd heard it yet. "You're just someone who took what didn't belong to you." Something flickered across Tiffany's perfect features. Not remorse exactly, but perhaps a moment of recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask she wore so well. An officer guided her toward the door, reading her rights as they went. Marcus stood frozen, watching his wife being led away. "I should go with her," he said, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. I looked at my son, really looked at him, for the first time in years. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd sacrificed for, now caught between his wife's crimes and his mother's pain. Part of me wanted to tell him to go, to follow the woman who had helped him abandon me, but another part, the mother who remembered him learning to ride a bike, graduating high school, smiling on his wedding day, couldn't bear to push him away again. "Do what you need to do," I said simply. For a long moment, he stood there, indecision written across his face. Then, without another word, he followed the officers and Tiffany out the door. The last thing I saw before the elevator doors closed was my son's face, a mask of confusion and loss, and Tiffany's back, straight and unyielding even in defeat. When they were gone, a strange silence fell over the penthouse. The officers who remained worked quietly, their movements careful and deliberate as they gathered the last of the evidence. Detective Rivera assured me they would be in touch, that the process was just beginning, that there would be statements and possibly testimony needed in the days to come. I nodded mechanically, too drained to fully process what she was saying. All I could think about was the look on Marcus's face as he stepped into that elevator. Not with me, not with Lindsay, but with the woman who had orchestrated so much pain. After the police left, Lindsay and I sat in the living room, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. "What happens now?" Lindsay asked, her voice small in the vastness of the penthouse. I didn't have an answer for her. The future stretched before us, unwritten and uncertain, but somehow, sitting there in Myrtle's home, my home now, with this broken young woman who had survived unspeakable betrayal, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows and warming the hardwood floors. Lindsay emerged from the guest bedroom, her face puffy from crying, but her eyes clearer than I'd seen them. "I made coffee," I offered, pushing a mug across the kitchen island. "And there's toast if you want it." She accepted the coffee with a small nod of thanks. "I've been thinking," she said after a long moment, "about what Aunt Myrtle would want us to do now." The thought made me smile despite everything. What do you think she'd say? Lindsay's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. Probably something about how flowers don't worry about the storms that bent them. They just keep growing toward the light. We spent that day in a strange kind of limbo, waiting for phones to ring, for news about Tiffany's arrangement, for some word from Marcus. But the calls that came were from Detective Rivera, updating us on the investigation, and Mr. Winters, Myrtle's attorney, asking if we needed anything. 3 days later, the elevator doors opened to reveal Marcus, looking haggard and older than his years. He stood awkwardly in the foyer, a duffel bag at his feet. "Tiffany's been formally charged," he said without preamble. "Securities fraud, conspiracy, medical fraud. Her father's company is in chaos. The board is calling for a complete audit." He ran a hand through his hair, which looked like it hadn't been washed in days. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know what she was doing." I studied my son's face, searching for the boy I'd raised, the man who had left me behind. And me, Marcus. "Did you know what she did to me?" His eyes dropped, unable to meet mine. I knew the trailer wasn't ideal, but she said it was temporary, that we were saving for a bigger place where you could have your own suite. Then time passed. She always had reasons why we couldn't visit, why we needed to wait. 3 years, I said softly. 3 years of waiting. He nodded, misery etched in every line of his face. I have no excuse. I let her control everything. Our finances, our schedules, our lives. I stopped questioning. It was easier that way. Lindsay appeared in the doorway to the living room, watching our exchange with wary eyes. Marcus looked at her, really looked, and something like recognition flickered across his face. "You're Tiffany's sister," he said. "The one she said was studying abroad." Lindsay nodded but said nothing. Marcus seemed to deflate further. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "to both of you. I'm so sorry. I didn't rush to comfort him. That would have been too easy, too much like erasing the past 3 years of abandonment. Instead, I simply stepped back, opening the door wider. "The guest room is taken," I said, "but the sofa pulls out." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. As he stepped into the penthouse, the elevator doors closing behind him, Lindsay moved to stand beside me. She didn't speak, but her hand found mine, squeezing gently. In that moment, with my son's uncertain future before me, and this damaged young woman beside me, I felt Myrtle's presence as clearly as if she stood in the room. "Can I call you Mom?" Lindsay asked suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. The question caught me off guard, making my throat constrict with unexpected emotion. For years, only one person had called me that, and he had forgotten me. Now, this girl who had lost everything was offering me a word that still held meaning, still held power. I couldn't answer, not with words. I just pulled her close, hugging her as tightly as my old arms could manage. For the first time in years, I felt alive, truly, completely alive. 6 months have passed since that night when truth spilled across the penthouse floor, like blood from an old wound. Sometimes I still wake up disoriented, reaching for the familiar leak in my trailer ceiling, only to find my fingers brushing against Egyptian cotton sheets in a room larger than my entire former home. Some habits die harder than others. The morning light streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floors. Atlanta spreads below me, a city I'm slowly coming to know, not as a visitor, but as home. I still marvel at the luxury of space, of silence that isn't filled with the creaks and groans of metal walls threatening to buckle in the next storm. Here, 32 floors above the world, storms just mean spectacular lightning shows viewed from behind triple-paned glass. But it isn't the luxury that makes this place home. It's the people who fill it. Lindsay stands in the kitchen, humming softly as she makes breakfast. Her hair, once a tangled mess, now falls in healthy waves past her shoulders. Her frame has filled out, no longer skeletal but strong. She still has nightmares, still flinches at unexpected sounds, still sees a therapist twice weekly. But there are moments, like now, as she flips pancakes with casual expertise, when I glimpse the woman she might have been without Tiffany's systematic destruction. "Extra blueberries in yours," she calls over her shoulder, sensing me watching. "And I made that tea you like." This casual domesticity between us still catches me off guard sometimes. How quickly we fell into rhythms with each other, as if we'd been waiting all along for exactly this connection. I never had a daughter, and Lindsay's mother died when she was young. We filled each other's empty spaces like water finding its level. "Marcus called," she adds, sliding a plate toward me. "He's finishing up that project in Denver today. Says he'll be back tomorrow." I nod, sipping the tea she's prepared exactly as I like it. Strong, with just a splash of milk and no sugar. My son and I are rebuilding, brick by careful brick. He doesn't live here. That would be too much, too soon. But he visits regularly, stays sometimes in the small third bedroom we've converted from Myrtle's office. He's working again, consulting for construction companies, using the engineering degree he'd almost abandoned when Tiffany pulled him into her family's business. Tiffany herself exists in our lives now only through legal proceedings and newspaper articles. The trial is ongoing. Complex financial crimes layered with medical fraud and civil lawsuits from investors she defrauded. Lindsay had to testify once. A day that left her shaking so badly I had to hold her through the night as she wept. But she did it, her voice clear and unwavering as she described years of calculated gaslighting and forced institutionalization. "I'm thinking of going back to school," Lindsay says now, joining me at the table with her own plate. "Online classes first, maybe? Art history like I was studying before everything." I reach across to squeeze her hand. Myrtle would be proud. At the mention of Myrtle, we both glance automatically toward the small table in the entryway where we keep her photograph. Not the one with young Tiffany, that's evidence now, but one I found in the blue box, of Myrtle in her 20s, standing before a field of sunflowers, her face tilted up toward the light. "I still don't understand why she chose to live in that trailer," Lindsay says, a question she's voiced many times. "She had all this, and yet she chose to be there, next to you." I've thought about this often over the months. "I think she was waiting," I say slowly, "for the right time, the right evidence. And maybe she recognized something in me, another woman discarded by people who should have loved her." After breakfast, I moved to the balcony garden that has become my domain. Myrtle's herbs have flourished under my care, joined now by flowers I've planted myself, marigolds and petunias, in homage to the woman who talked to plants like they were people. Sometimes when I'm out here alone, I find myself doing the same, whispering encouragement to struggling seedlings or praising particularly vibrant blooms. "You're outdoing yourself today," I tell a riot of purple petunias. Myrtle would say you're gossiping up a storm. The memory makes me smile rather than cry now. Grief has transformed, like so many things in my life, into something I can carry without being crushed by its weight. Inside, I hear Lindsay setting up her easel in the living room. She started painting again last month, tentative at first, but with growing confidence. Her therapist says it's helping her process the trauma, giving shape and color to feelings too complex for words. The penthouse walls are slowly filling with her work, abstract explosions of color alongside more structured pieces that hint at the architecture of healing. My phone chimes with a text from Marcus. "Project finished early. Heading to airport now. See you tonight." I type back a quick affirmative, feeling the familiar mixture of joy and apprehension his visits still evoke. Our relationship is a tender new growth, vulnerable to frost, but reaching steadily towards sunlight. Later, after Lindsay has gone to her therapy appointment, I sit in Myrtle's, my favorite chair by the window, watching clouds drift across the Atlanta skyline. I think about the strange path that led me here, from abandonment to inheritance, from isolation to this unexpected family we're piecing together from broken parts. Myrtle's last tape, the one labeled "For Loretta, the Beginning," sits in the drawer of my bedside table. I watched it alone, the night after Tiffany was taken away. In it, Myrtle had spoken directly to me, as if she'd known all along our paths would cross, our stories would intertwine. "I chose you because I saw myself in you," she'd said, her eyes crinkling with the wisdom of years. "Someone forgotten by the world but still stubbornly alive. Someone who deserves a second chance. The penthouse isn't the inheritance, Loretta. It's just a place. The real gift is the chance to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. And that's what we're doing, Lindsay and I, and even Marcus in his way, building something new from ashes." When Marcus arrives that evening, tired but smiling, bearing takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and news of a potential permanent job in Atlanta, I feel another piece click into place. As we sit around the dining table, the same one where Tiffany's crimes were laid bare, I look at these two damaged souls who have become my family and feel a fullness I'd forgotten was possible. Later, after Marcus has gone to his hotel and Lindsay has retired to her room, I stand again at the window, looking out at the city lights. I think about that rusty trailer in Mobile where I counted days of abandonment, where the ceiling leaked and the walls shook with every gust of wind. I think about the woman in worn slippers who shared her tea and spoke to flowers. Sometimes what we need isn't a new beginning, I whisper to the night sky, echoing Myrtle's words from her final recording. It's someone who sees us before the end. The penthouse sleeps around me, no longer an alien landscape of luxury, but a haven, a sanctuary, a home. And in its peaceful silence, I finally understand what Myrtle knew all along, that the spaces between people can be filled with either emptiness or connection, and the choice is ours to make. Sometimes the people who discard us are the very ones who teach us our own worth. My journey from that trembling trailer to this penthouse wasn't just about gaining wealth. It was about finding family in unexpected places and learning that second chances come in forms we never imagine. Would you have had the courage to confront those who abandoned you? Would you have opened your heart to someone like Lindsay, who needed healing as much as you did? The cruelest betrayals often lead us to our greatest blessings. Myrtle taught me that a person's true value isn't measured by what they own, but by what they're willing to give when they have nothing left. She chose to see me when everyone else had forgotten I existed, and in doing so, she changed not just my life, but Lindsay's, and even Marcus's. Perhaps the most powerful act we can perform in this world is simply to see someone, truly see them, before the end. If this story touched your heart, please consider following our channel for more tales of redemption, family secrets, and unexpected second chances. Share with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth today. Remember, we never know whose life we might change simply by refusing to look away when the rest of the world has. Like, comment, and let us know. What unexpected blessing has come from your greatest heartbreak?